I am going to show you how to eat foods that are high in carbohydrates, such as bread, potatoes, and rice, without causing spikes in blood sugar levels. So, let's take a look at how to reduce blood sugar spikes with resistant starch. In your diet, there are three main types of food: carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. The types of foods that raise blood sugar levels, meaning blood glucose levels, are primarily carbohydrates. Carbohydrate-rich foods include potatoes, rice, beans, bread, corn, bananas, mangoes, sugar, and many others. Potatoes, rice, pasta, and bread contain starch. Starch is a carbohydrate made up of glucose arranged in long chains, like beads or pearls strung together. For example, when you eat a potato, it enters your stomach. Your body then begins to break down this large starch molecule to release glucose, which then enters your bloodstream and raises your blood glucose levels. This is your blood sugar level. When you think about blood sugar levels, there are two main types of starch. You have regular starch and resistant starch. The remarkable thing about resistant starch is that your body cannot break it down to release glucose. Therefore, resistant starch remains in the intestines and behaves like fiber. It feeds the beneficial bacteria in your gut. Foods that contain a lot of resistant starch include green bananas, beans, peas, and tiger nuts. However, unfortunately, when you cook these foods, you destroy the resistant starch, and it becomes just like regular starch. When you eat it, it raises your blood sugar levels. But after cooking potatoes, rice, pasta, and other starchy foods in water, something interesting happens. When you cool these foods in the refrigerator overnight, some of the regular starch that raises blood sugar levels transforms into another type of resistant starch. Then, if you heat these foods again and cool them down, you will get even more of this resistant starch. The wonderful thing is that heating does not destroy this type of resistant starch. You can achieve the same effect with bread if you freeze it and then thaw it before eating. By using this method, you can reduce blood sugar spikes by up to 40%. Another fantastic aspect of consuming resistant starch is that over time, it makes your body more sensitive to insulin. This means that when you eat, your blood sugar levels will not rise as much as before. That is why you need to start thinking about what you are going to eat 1 or 2 days in advance. This way, you can go through the heating and cooling process to ensure that these foods will not raise your blood sugar levels as much when you eat them. So, I have one more tip for you when it comes to cooking rice. Adding coconut oil to rice while it cooks, and then cooling it in the refrigerator overnight, can further increase the amount of resistant starch. There are 3 drinks that can help prevent blood sugar levels from rising after consuming starchy foods. I recommend the first 2, but I will mention the third as well. So the first drink you can have is lemon or lime juice. Either one is fine. Of course, it is better to consume fresh lemon or lime juice due to the vitamin C and antioxidants. But what you really need is the acid. In our bodies, there is an enzyme called salivary amylase, which breaks down starch into smaller units that ultimately provide you with glucose. When you consume acid with starch, it stops the action of salivary amylase, meaning that starch is not broken down. Consequently, glucose does not enter the bloodstream. Another thing that this acid does is slow down the rate of gastric emptying, which means you feel full for longer and are less likely to snack. Thus, the digestion process is slowed down, so even when glucose eventually enters the bloodstream, its rise occurs much more slowly and gradually. The second drink you can have is vinegar. You have probably heard of apple cider vinegar, raw, filtered, and so on. It really does not matter. Any type of vinegar will do. This means you can use white vinegar, apple cider vinegar, rice vinegar, or whatever you like. The important thing is that the vinegar should not have added sugar, and vinegar acts almost the same as lemon or lime juice. However, it has some additional benefits. It affects the muscles, helping them absorb sugars from the bloodstream, and apple cider vinegar in particular contains antioxidants and polyphenols from apples, which are used to make the vinegar. If you consume raw and unfiltered vinegar, it means it contains the vinegar mother, which acts as a probiotic and can help if you have gut issues. Another drink you can have is wine. Yes, wine is somewhat acidic, but there are other ways to lower blood sugar levels. When you are not eating, your liver breaks down stored carbohydrates to obtain glucose, and it also produces glucose from protein and fat. All of this is to ensure that blood sugar levels never fall below a certain level. When you consume alcohol, alcohol takes priority over everything else in your liver. Therefore, your liver will first break down the alcohol. While it is breaking down the alcohol, it cannot produce glucose from glycogen, nor can it produce glucose from proteins and fats, which means that blood sugar levels continue to decrease. If I had to rank these three drinks from worst to best, wine would be at the bottom of the list. Because yes, it does lower blood sugar levels, but it does so in a very unpredictable manner. When you are taking medication to lower blood sugar levels, it is not recommended to combine it with alcohol. Another issue is that if you have diabetes, you may already have fatty liver disease. Therefore, when you consume alcohol, which also causes fatty liver, you create a double problem for yourself. In second place on our list is lemon or lime juice, thanks to the vitamin C and antioxidants it contains, especially if it is freshly squeezed juice. In first place is vinegar, particularly apple cider vinegar, because it affects the muscles, increases insulin sensitivity, and can help with gut issues. So, to reduce the increase in blood sugar levels that can occur when consuming starchy foods, we will look at what you can do before, during, and after meals. So what should you do before you start eating? Here are a few options. You can take 2 tablespoons of lemon or lime juice or vinegar, add it to half a glass of water, and drink it. You can take fiber supplements, such as konjac root or psyllium, with a large amount of water. You can also take 5 grams of fenugreek powder or 500 milligrams of a fenugreek supplement. Finally, before a meal, you can eat a large plate of vegetables, especially leafy greens. To achieve the maximum effect of lowering blood sugar levels, take all of this at least 30 minutes before eating. These tips are very useful if you are going to an event or a special occasion and are not sure if there will be healthy food available for you to eat. Now that we have discussed what to do before a meal, what should you do during a meal to prevent blood sugar levels from spiking too high? First of all, never eat carbohydrates alone. Always combine them with protein, such as meat, fish, or eggs, along with fats and fiber, for example, leafy vegetables. Combine them with at least one of these, and if you can, with all 3. If you are eating a salad with a dressing made of oil and vinegar, both will help reduce the starch release from the food you will eat later. For instance, if you are eating a sandwich with an egg, the egg contains fat and protein, and you are combining this with the carbohydrates in the bread. If you are eating rice, you can pair it with beans, as beans contain fiber and some protein, while rice contains starch. You can add a bit of butter or melted oil to starchy potatoes, which are fatty, and you can eat cooked starchy oatmeal with Greek yogurt, nuts, seeds, and berries, which will add fiber, protein, and fat. If you are preparing a snack, make it with vegetables instead of bread. Then, looking at your plate, find the foods that are highest in fiber. Usually these will be vegetables, and you should eat them first, followed by protein and fat such as meat, chicken, or fish. And finally, in the last instance, you eat starchy foods such as rice, potatoes, and pasta. But in some situations, it is not very practical to separate the food and eat one, then another, and then yet another. For example, if you are eating with bolognese sauce, it will be difficult for you to eat the sauce first and then the pasta. And again, you do not want to suck all the joy out of eating, so you might just decide to eat everything together, and that is perfectly fine. Then, especially if you do not want to drink vinegar with water, you can find ways to add vinegar to your food. This can be a dressing for vegetables or salad, or you might try adding pickles. The Japanese add vinegar to rice, the British eat vinegar with fish and chips, and this all helps to reduce the carbohydrate load from these foods. So let us talk about what to do after eating. But before that, you might ask, why should I even care about spikes in blood sugar levels? The main function of glucose, which comes from carbohydrates, is to enter the cells so that you can use it for energy. When your cells continue to fill up with large amounts of sugar due to repeated spikes in blood sugar levels, at some point, they do not know what to do with all that sugar. If they cannot use it quickly enough, it simply accumulates in your cells, and you slow down. So, if you are going on a trip in your car and you have a full tank of gas, you will get much further than a person who has half a tank of gas. So think of your pancreas like a car. The pancreas produces insulin, which helps lower blood sugar levels. By the time you realize that your blood sugar is elevated, you may have already lost half of the insulin-producing cells in your pancreas. Therefore, if you have diabetes, when it comes to lowering blood sugar levels after eating, regarding the pancreas, you start your journey with half a tank of gas. This makes it harder for you to lower your blood sugar levels. And then there is another problem. When you have diabetes, you also have what we call insulin resistance. This means that even when your pancreas produces insulin, the insulin goes to your cells, asking them to open up and remove sugar from your blood, and they refuse. And the sugar just stays in your blood. This significantly complicates lowering blood sugar after each spike. And when all this sugar is floating around in your body, it sticks to everything. Ultimately, this can lead to heart disease, kidney problems, memory issues, and the appearance of wrinkles. This is what we call glycation. The same thing happens when you toast a piece of bread. Once you toast it, you cannot untoast it. The more spikes in glucose you have, the more sugar circulates in your body, and the faster you brown inside. Even if you do not have a high blood sugar level, fluctuations in blood sugar can often cause your body to store fat. Additionally, variations in blood sugar throughout the day affect the quality of your everyday life. You may experience dizziness, brain fog, anxiety, food cravings, headaches, mood swings, nausea, and constant hunger more frequently. When you eat a sweet snack, you might feel great for a while. This is due to the happiness hormone dopamine, which is released every time you get a dose of sugar. Then, when your blood sugar level drops, you begin to feel some of those negative consequences I mentioned earlier. Blood sugar spikes also temporarily suppress your immune system. If these spikes happen rarely, it is not a problem, but if they occur consistently, day after day, it means that for significant periods of time, your immune system is not functioning at full capacity, making you vulnerable to infections. So what should you do after eating? For 30 minutes after a meal, try to be active for 10 to 20 minutes, or longer if you can. You can go for a walk, dance, do kickboxing, or take the stairs. It does not matter. The important thing is to get slightly out of breath and engage the large muscles of your body, those in your torso and legs. The wonderful thing about muscles is that when they are active, they can take glucose from the blood without insulin. This is excellent for you if you have type 1 diabetes, because it means you will need to inject less insulin after meals, which is always a good thing. So what about snacks? Choose savory rather than sweet. Opt for foods like cheese, nuts, vegetables with dip or pickles. All of these are good options, and choose savory baked goods. I will explain why in a moment. Then, drink a little vinegar during your snack or within 30 minutes after snacking. The reason you prefer savory, starchy foods is that vinegar affects the breakdown of starch in the body, but does not affect the breakdown of sugar. Therefore, if you eat a lot of sugar, your blood sugar level will still rise, even if you have taken vinegar. In summary, the proper consumption of carbohydrates is a balance between nutritional value and impact on blood sugar. Listen to your body and choose healthy sources of carbohydrates to maintain energy and well-being. Let your diet be varied and tasty, and your health stable and strong. Take care of yourself and monitor your levels